The 17-year-old, who's a former head girl and the daughter of an officer of the West Mercia Force, was last seen at 7:30 on Sunday evening, leaving her family home here in Wellington. Her parents thought she was going to spend the night with friends.
Georgia Williams was born on September 17, 1995, in the town of Telford, Shropshire, England. Raised in a small but close-knit family, Georgia shared her home with her older sister Scarlett and their loving parents, Lynette and Steve Williams, a dedicated police detective. Georgia's nurturing nature stood out from a young age. She genuinely cared for others, always going out of her way to ensure the people around her felt happy and included. This remarkable quality would, tragically, lead to devastating consequences. Though Georgia faced bullying during middle school, her high school experience was drastically different. She blossomed socially, quickly becoming popular and well-liked by her peers. In fact, she became the head girl of her school, a prestigious position highlighting her leadership and popularity. In addition to her academic success, Georgia pursued her passion for helping others through her involvement in the Air Cadets, where she trained with hopes of one day serving as an RAF paramedic. At 17, Georgia took on a job at a local petrol station, further showcasing her ability to connect with others. She formed friendships easily, even with those who struggled to fit in. One such person was a shy and awkward colleague. Unlike others who might have overlooked him, Georgia's kindness prompted her to befriend him, ensuring he felt included in group activities. The colleague Georgia reached out to was 22-year-old Jamie Reynolds, a man who had difficulty socializing and seemed to keep to himself. Georgia's warm and welcoming nature allowed him to join their group of co-workers, which ultimately led to a horrifying chain of events that no one could have anticipated. Jamie Reynolds, the man Georgia kindly took under her wing, had a disturbing side that went unnoticed by many. Despite his awkward and quiet demeanor, he harbored dark fantasies that involved violence and control over women. His obsession with these fantasies had started long before he met Georgia, but her kindness toward him gave him an opening to get closer. Unfortunately, Georgia had no idea that the friendship she offered would soon be used against her in the most horrifying way. Over time, Jamie became increasingly fixated on Georgia. While outwardly maintaining a friendly facade, his dark thoughts intensified. He had a history of watching extreme and violent pornography, often involving women being tortured or strangled. This fixation had even led him to create a disturbing collection of violent drawings, videos, and other media. Despite this, no one, including Georgia, suspected the dangerous turn his thoughts were taking. To Georgia, he was just another co-worker who needed a friend. Jamie Reynolds had developed feelings for Georgia Williams, but when she didn't return those feelings, he appeared to respect her decision. Outwardly, he remained her friend, seemingly accepting the situation. However, beneath this calm exterior, Jamie was harboring a dark, unhealthy obsession with Georgia, coupled with deeply twisted fantasies. One day, while working together at the petrol station, Jamie confided in Georgia that he was unhappy with his life. He expressed frustration over his job and shared that he wanted something more fulfilling. Jamie was getting older and no longer saw a future at the petrol station. He yearned to pursue a passion that could potentially lead to a career. Being the supportive and caring person she was, Georgia sat down with Jamie to help him figure out what he might want to pursue. They talked about his interests and hobbies, and Jamie mentioned his love for photography. Georgia, eager to encourage him, suggested that he consider turning photography into a career. Jamie liked the idea and seized the opportunity, asking Georgia if she could help him build a professional portfolio. He asked if she could be his first model. Not wanting to disappoint her friend, Georgia agreed to participate. The pair planned the photo shoot for Sunday, May 26, 2013, at Jamie's parents' house. The arrangement was casual, with the expectation that some of their mutual friends would also be present to join in the shoot. Everything seemed innocent enough. On the day of the photo shoot, Georgia left her home around 7 p.m., telling her family she expected to be back soon. It was supposed to be a simple, fun evening with friends, but as the hours passed, Georgia still hadn't returned home. At first, her mother wasn't overly concerned. It wasn't unusual for Georgia to lose track of time when spending time with friends, so she sent her a text asking when she planned to come home. She received a reply from Georgia saying that the photo shoot had finished a while ago, and that she was just hanging out with her friends. Georgia mentioned she probably wouldn't be home until late. The text seemed normal, ending with the usual 3 kiss emojis Georgia often sent. There was nothing to suggest anything was wrong, and Georgia's mother had no reason to suspect anything out of the ordinary. Georgia wasn't the type to get into trouble, so her parents went to bed assuming everything was fine. However, when Georgia's parents woke up the next morning, they were immediately alarmed. Georgia still hadn't come home. This was highly unusual for their responsible daughter. As the hours went by and Georgia remained missing, panic set in and her family realized something was terribly wrong. Georgia Williams's mother, growing increasingly concerned, sent another text to her daughter around 6:30 a.m. the following morning, asking where she had been and when she would be home. An hour later, at 7:30 a.m., she received a response that Georgia had stayed overnight at a friend's house. The message also mentioned that her phone battery was dying, so she might not be able to respond further. This explanation seemed plausible, and her mother, unaware of the horror that had already unfolded, had no reason to be alarmed. What Georgia's mother didn't realize was that these texts weren't being sent by her daughter at all. It was now May 27th, and Georgia's parents knew she was planning to attend a music festival that day. When she didn't return home, they assumed she had gone straight to the event from her friend's house. Despite their growing unease, they held on to the belief that Georgia would be home by the next morning. After all, she had her first driving lesson scheduled, something she had been excited about for weeks. That night, her parents stayed up late, waiting for Georgia to come home. But as the hours ticked by and she still hadn't returned, their concern escalated into panic. They began calling relatives and friends, desperately trying to locate their daughter. But no one had seen or spoken to her in days. The morning of her driving lesson arrived, but Georgia did not. Unable to wait any longer, her parents reported her missing to the police. They provided all the details they could, but there was little concrete information.
Just come home, Georgia. It's like all your friends are so worried right now, and they're trying so hard to fight and keep themselves from falling apart, and they need you here.
All they knew was that Georgia had gone to Jamie Reynolds' house for a photo shoot on May 26th, and they had no idea where she had gone or who she was with after that. The police took immediate action, looking into Jamie Reynolds as the last person known to have seen Georgia. What they uncovered about him was deeply disturbing. As investigators delved into Jamie's background, a chilling picture began to emerge. They found evidence of his dark, violent fantasies, much of which revolved around the domination and torture of women. His obsession with Georgia had gone far beyond admiration or infatuation. He had been planning something horrific. Reynolds had a troubling history that included a previous attempted attack on another young woman, though he had never been formally charged. Despite these warning signs, no one had suspected he would take things this far. As police dug deeper into Jamie Reynolds' life, it became clear that Georgia Williams was in grave danger. Reynolds had been harboring violent fantasies for years, and his behavior suggested that he was not the harmless introvert many had believed him to be. With Georgia missing and Reynolds being the last known person to have seen her, he quickly became the prime suspect. Investigators wasted no time searching Jamie Reynolds' home, hoping to find any clue about Georgia's whereabouts. What they found would confirm their worst fears. Inside his house, they uncovered disturbing evidence that suggested Georgia had been lured into a premeditated trap. The police found cameras and other equipment set up at Jamie's home, revealing that the photo shoot Georgia had agreed to was never meant to be a friendly favor. Instead, it was part of a sinister plan. Even more disturbing were the violent images and videos stored on his devices, many of which depicted women being harmed or tortured. Among these chilling discoveries were items directly linked to Georgia, including photos taken just before her disappearance. As law enforcement continued to flick through the images, they began to get progressively more dark and disturbing. The next few images showed a distressed Georgia naked and standing on a red recycling box, hands seemingly bound behind her with the rope hanging above her. After moving the box aside, Reynolds recorded the last moments as she fought for breath before engaging in intimate acts with her deceased body in different areas of the house, including on his parents' bed. The police continued to investigate his home and discovered a large collection of 16,800 photos and 72 videos featuring explicit and violent content. Jamie appeared to be experimenting with creating his own snuff films, and he later confessed that he had a fascination with themes of strangulation. Jamie's parents returned home early from their holiday to discuss their concerns with the police. They revealed that he had been viewing extremely violent pornography since he was 14, though it was possible he started even earlier. That was just when they discovered it. During the investigation, the police discovered several notebooks belonging to Jamie Reynolds. These notebooks contained numerous fictional stories he had written, each detailing troubling themes involving women. Additionally, investigators found that he had spent time on social media, printing pictures of young women and adding disturbing illustrations to them. One particular story stood out. It was titled, "Georgia Williams in Surprise." The contents of this story eerily mirrored the events that took place with Georgia, leading police to believe that Jamie had been planning his actions for months. The story, which he started writing in January and finished just 3 weeks before Georgia's disappearance, suggested a premeditated intent to carry out what he had written. After Georgia Williams's disappearance, Jamie Reynolds refused to cooperate with police and denied any involvement. Despite their questioning, he consistently claimed innocence and would not reveal where Georgia's body was. Faced with this challenge, investigators turned to tracking Jamie's movements from the day after the tragic event, starting from Monday morning. The police began by reviewing CCTV footage from a local petrol station, where Jamie had stopped to refuel his van. Chillingly, it was later confirmed that Georgia's body was in the back of that very vehicle at the time. After filling up, Jamie drove 60 miles to a nearby cinema, leaving Georgia's body in the van while he went inside to watch a movie. Unfortunately, after leaving the cinema, Jamie's trail went cold. To reignite the search, authorities issued a public appeal, asking anyone who had seen Jamie's van on that day to come forward with information. Fortunately, the public appeal worked. Several witnesses reported seeing a van matching Jamie's description on the Nanty Garth mountain pass near Wrexham. The area was remote, densely wooded, and known for its muddy conditions. Witnesses specifically recalled Jamie because his van had become stuck in the mud, and passers-by had stopped to help him free it. Acting on this crucial lead, police quickly headed to the woods where Jamie had been seen. It was in this secluded area that they made the devastating discovery of Georgia's body. She was found in a remote part of the woods, and her body was respectfully recovered and transported back to Shropshire, where her grieving family awaited answers. Georgia's tragic fate had finally been uncovered, bringing an end to the search, but leaving behind a deep sense of loss and heartbreak for her loved ones and the community.
These officers in here shouldn't sleep at nights because they let Georgia down.
In 2014, Jamie Reynolds filed an appeal against his whole life sentence, seeking to overturn the court's decision. However, his appeal was unsuccessful, and he remained in prison without the possibility of parole. Justice for Georgia Williams was upheld, but a year later, in 2015, new revelations emerged that shed light on the tragic failings that may have allowed this crime to occur. In 2015, a serious case review examined the handling of Jamie Reynolds by multiple agencies, including police officers, children's services, and mental health workers. The review was highly critical, revealing a lack of communication and cooperation among these entities. It highlighted that Reynolds had been on the radar of authorities 5 years before Georgia's murder, when he attempted to strangle another young woman after luring her to his home. Despite this alarming incident, the review found that key opportunities to intervene were missed. Had these agencies worked together and addressed the red flags presented by Reynolds' earlier behavior, the outcome could have been drastically different. Upon reading the findings of the serious case review, Georgia's parents were devastated. They expressed their anguish in a heartfelt statement, saying, "Having lost Georgia to pure evil, we cried when we read this report and the failings of all agencies involved, because it was so obvious that Reynolds was, if not one already, a murderer in the making. Georgia's death could have been prevented. There is no sentence that we can ever say we're satisfied with because it'll never bring Georgia back. She's dead, she's gone physically, and lives in our hearts." Georgia's mother, Lynette Williams, has since chronicled the family's tragic loss in her book titled Our Georgia. In the book, she reveals the deep sense of betrayal, They felt due to the systemic failures that allowed Jamie Reynolds, who was obsessed with violent content, to remain free and eventually take their daughter's life. The book offers an intimate and heart-wrenching insight into the aftermath of Georgia's death and highlights the critical lapses in the handling of Reynolds' previous dangerous behaviors. Georgia Williams's tragic death is a heart-wrenching reminder of the dangers that can hide behind trust and kindness. While her family continues to mourn the loss of their beloved daughter, they also seek to ensure that lessons are learned from the failures that allowed her killer to remain free. Through Georgia's story, they hope to inspire change and prevent future tragedies.
This is a poem that's been suggested by Georgia's friends, and it's apt. We thought of you today, but that is nothing new. We thought of you yesterday, and the days before that too. We think of you in silence, and we often speak your name. Now all we have is memories, and your picture in a frame.